And when we got to San Diego, Alan Keyes met with us and said, I am releasing my delegates. I would appreciate it if you would vote for Bob Dole. And most of us did. One guy that I will forever respect, Joe Ortworth from St. Charles County, voted for Alan Keyes anyway. And so Alan Keyes got one vote at that convention, which I thought was cool. But the rest of us voted for Dole as directed. As soon as somebody drops out, those delegates, he may ask that they vote for somebody else, but according to your feelings, I think at the time, you're not necessarily obligated. You're pretty much free to make up your own mind as soon as somebody drops out. It's hard to keep track of who all is there and what they're committed to. Right here.
On the caucus, or is it binding, or in other words, do we have that at all the way at the caucus level of the delegates, you know, that we're going to send to the next level as to whether
Only
they're
if your rules
so
write
you
it
have to
that way.
specify that in the rules?
It would have to be specified in the rules for delegates from the caucus to the convention, the state convention, for instance, to be obligated. That would have to be part of the rules. If it's not, then whoever gets elected goes down there to use their best judgment.
Do you get to interview these people on the slate, or do they say, in other words, like, how do I know who they're kind of leaning towards if they're going to go to the next level?
If you're a member at the caucus and it looks like it's going too fast and you don't feel like you know who the people are that are going and who they're supporting, you could say, Mr. Chairman, I move that we have each member of the slate state who they're for. And it would have to be seconded, and the group would have to approve that you're going to divert and go in that direction. If the group says, yes, we want to know who these people are voting for, then your motion carried, and that should happen. In most cases, in America, 2 hours is about the limit of people's patience for a meeting like this. And I can guarantee you there are some passionate people who, if the meeting's adjourned for lunch and half of the delegates go home, there will be at least one candidate who will have a lot of people there because his people love him and they are committed and passionate. And I respect them for it, but I hope that the caucus chairman will not adjourn the meeting because I know some people will leave at that point. Yes, sir?
Is there a advantage, or if you can go to either the congressional or senate, but they're not available to go to Tampa, is there an advantage? It's very slim, so if you are a delegate, you can choose to go to either one of those conventions, just not put yourself forward to go to Tampa, correct?
You can put yourself forward to go to any of these meetings that you think you can swing.
But when you're there, you can, as a delegate, what do you?
No, you're not
what do
going
you
to try
do
to go
as
to
a
the national
delegate?
convention from the local caucus. That's
No.
not something.
If you go to the state convention,
You'll go to the
I
national
can-
the district.
What do you do there? Kind
to
of
get on the
same
slate,
thing? Well,
know the state chairman.
But you do the same kind of thing at where you
You can-
talk about, you vote and
You can,
you get a vote, do only the delegates to the convention, I guess, are the only people that are allowed there?
There-
They're
yes.
the only people that vote?
there will be over 1,000 delegates at the state convention, and they will probably not want to take the time to hear from everybody on the list. You can make the motion
But
if
you
you can
vote.
get the chair to recognize you.
But you get a vote for the delegates.
Oh, absolutely.
The
Another thing that I didn't, well, I don't know if I should go into this or not. At the conventions, at the district convention and the state convention, it's not just stand up and anybody make a motion. When your caucus is over, either at the end of the caucus or when you come together at the next meeting, you will have a little huddle, and your group should choose a spokesman, a caucus foreman for your county group. And that person will then be given the floor as the guy that will stand up and ask for it to be approved. And they will start alphabetically through the counties in your district or state. And is there anybody from Allen County that wants to make the chair recognizes the foreman from Allen County. The Allen County chairman, just like at the national convention, if you've ever watched it, the states can defer to another state, or they can pass their right to another state, or they can make a nomination. And then after he's done, they go to the next state alphabetically. In our case, we'll do it by counties alphabetically within the within the meeting. And so if you want to be nominated, you can approach your county chairman to put forth a slate, and hopefully it will get passed.
At that point, you're nominating delegates, not candidates.
That's right. You would be a delegate, still a delegate going to the national convention.
Point of information,
Yes, sir?
can a person be on more than one slate?
I believe the county convention, the call to convention rules do not allow you to be on multiple slates.
Proposed slates that are up for nomination.
As I said, I believe one slate only. That is a state rule, not decided by the county, and that's the way I've heard it. I haven't read it, but I've heard it. Let's take this lady over here. She's had her hand up a long time.
It's not clear to me, what's the point of going and voting for a slate if you don't know those people?
I understand completely and totally agree with you. That, that is one of the weaknesses of this process. If it gets done and that question is not answered to your satisfaction. So you should make the case when you get to the meeting, if it's not in the rules, that you want to, you make that motion, and hopefully the rest of the group will agree with you and it'll pass. Susan?
Why would it make a difference if you're gonna do the rules first, and the rules say, for instance, that the slate of delegates will vote all for one, or they'll divide them up, but if you're going to make that, doesn't matter whether your delegates are for Kim Jong-il or whoever, as long as the number of the delegate is gonna go, it's just automatic vote, right?
When the rules come out of the rules committee and get approved, that's when you want to make the motion. If that's important to you to know who the slate's going to be for, you're going to want to adjust the rules on the floor of the meeting at that point in time to say the slates need to indicate who people are for, or if they're going to the next level uncommitted. That is not required from the caucus to the state and district convention. It is required, as I understand it, to be committed from the state or district convention to the national.
So in other words, at the caucus meeting, the delegates, the candidates going as a delegate to the district or the state would not be committed at our level, but they would have to be committed from the district and the state to go to the convention.
It's a different, they may or may not be the same bunch of people.
Okay, so what we wanna do on the caucus level is to make sure we know when they get to the district or the state, which way they're gonna fly.
As best you can. Yes, back there. How are we doing on time, Frida?
We have another 5 minutes.
Is that including the question and answer period? Okay.
Hey, John, I don't know if you remember me or not. Debbie.
You're Debbie to me.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
Yeah,
I
and
haven't
I
seen
know
you
we don't have
since
much
we went
time.
to
We'll visit after.
San Diego together.
I was the state leader for Allen Keys, and he and I went to the national convention together, so that's why we're.
Where have you been all these years? How come you haven't-
I have to say one thing, and you've done a great job, John. John has directed everyone that the power resides within the chair of the committees and the townships. I would differ with him slightly on this. In my opinion, because this is what I did and this is what everyone else did during that campaign, you need to get in touch with the chair of the candidate that you want elected, because that chair will be organizing to get this caucus run in the favor of that candidate. So let's say you are a Santorian, you want Santorian. You get in touch with the committee, the people who are running his campaign, and you say, I'm going to go to this caucus. They will help you know who else is going to be there. They will help you vote for who is to be chair of that caucus. They will organize this all ahead of time, and you will have a much greater chance of having it run the way you want and of becoming a delegate. If you go there by yourself, you will have very little chance, unless it's just a miracle from the Lord, to be on that delegate list and to have the caucus run the way you want it to be run.
Okay, well, that's optimistic, that each candidate is that well organized and will have somebody out there working on his behalf. And I would pretty much say, I've heard from Tyler somebody who's a college student at the University of Missouri who's organizing in Missouri for Rick Santorum, that Tyler will not understand this process if he's, from what I've seen of all of the campaigns, possibly Romney's got enough money to have paid people in each county supervising this. I don't think that's likely to happen. What I would suggest that you do is that you call your county chairman, who will typically bring one of the slates, see if you can get on his slate. If he says, sorry, the slate's all filled up, and you think he's for a candidate that you're not for, then I would suggest that you start calling friends and neighbors for the candidate that you're for, and do the best you can through their candidates coordinator or whatever to put a slate together of your own, or even a mixed slate. You might work with, like we worked with the Buchanan in Jasper County. I went to the national convention from the 7th District working with 2 Keys delegates and a Buchanan delegate. And then we went to the next level and we worked with the Dole side at the next level. So it's all very fluid and somewhat frustrating. Don't be surprised if the first time you go, you have to chalk it up as a learning experience.
So John, which process do you think is better, the caucus process or just having a primary?
Primary.
Primary.
Everybody understands.
The primary does not eliminate the caucus. The rule in Missouri for the last 3 or 4 cycles has been that the caucus delegates are pledged according to the turnout at the primary. But the delegates are still selected through a caucus process. Personally, I prefer the caucus system because I don't want the president, the members of the Kiwanis Club coming to my election for leadership in the Rotary Club saying who should be your party leader. And with our open system, I think we get there's a better chance for a conservative candidate who the engaged people want, not to exclude anybody else, but that's just a personal preference. Most people say, oh, that doesn't sound very fair, any more than our electoral college sounds fair to them, and they're probably all going to vote for changing to a total popular outcome of the national election. It's kind of the same rationale. There are people on both sides of the equation. If we got to a closed primary, I'd be happy to obligate the votes that way, but it's kind of for grabs right now.
I worked the polls for the first time this Tuesday in just the little chit chat that we did. I had a Republican lady trying to explain the caucus system, and she said, oh honey, don't even bother going. The delegates are bought and paid for by the candidates. Now, can you explain to me what that meant?
I think she's
Not
full of,
true.
you know what? That's as untrue as you could possibly get. I don't know
That
where that,
she
I don't
said,
know where that would come from.
because see, I'm reading every Republican, every registered Republican that's active can go to the caucus.
That's right.
And then from there, we elect the delegates? Or do you already have people, you said you had 200 people, 250 people from your area?
No.
That's the whole
The whole
county.
county. No, we're trying to get people to come to our
Okay.
particular township. You know,
But
that's what
not
this meeting's all about.
per, I think her comment to me was, most of the delegates are bought and paid for by the candidates anyway.
That's just
She
not.
probably
So
is
when
of
you
the
go
opinion
there-
that the United States
Not
of America
true.
organized 9/11 too.
Okay, but this is gonna be my first
It's
caucus,
not
and
to
I'm.
say that it couldn't be that way. If Donald Trump was running, with all respect to Donald Trump, not to say that he would do this, but he might have enough money that he would try to pay people to go and be delegates. But it still has to be passed by the people.
Okay.
It's an open vote.
Just want to emphasize that's the main point. The reason the person has that opinion is because people aren't involved in the caucus process. More people that get involved, the less likely that it could be influenced by money. So it's
Okay,
all about
two more
turnout.
questions, comments, in the back here and in the front here.
I just want to comment, I like Debbie Dewey's comment from earlier about getting, working ahead of time and meeting people that are like-minded, liking Rick Santorum. Let's all 10 of us show up tomorrow and we'll all vote for our slate. I like your comment also about working together with another group, say, Santorum and Paul or whoever works together eventually, maybe, I don't know. And then kind of the other one, just,
I've got ADD, so let me answer that one first. I would recommend if you are avid for a candidate, that you become the organizer in his county or in his district, and make yourself known that you're organizing delegates for your candidate at the caucus, and try to raise your flag high enough that people will help you build a slate of delegates and you can take it. I think Debbie kind of suggested they will be organized enough to have somebody in the county, probably not unless one of you volunteers to be that person.
So she mentioned about in Franklin County, the question from Franklin County.
Yeah.
So what would we gonna do to make like a motion to make like a rule that we want the candidate, the slate to be committed to one candidate or whatever? That would be, I guess, one idea. Make a motion to do something like that.
Right.
Could you like say, I'm committed, but I'm leaning toward, my first choice is Rick Santorum. Would that be an idea also?
The rules of the caucus will decide all these nuances. Over here.
Two statements, John. One, on your Putman's Patriots, I'd like to see you add that people need to get involved in boards. I mean, our system's rotten to the core. So we need fire board, ambulance board,
sure.
school board. That's something I'd like to see you add. Second, on the thing that you're talking about, getting people to a particular one, I'm a county chairman, and I have been getting calls from different campaigns trying to figure out if we're gonna bind our candidates, because what they're trying to do is fish and figure out, they don't have enough resources for every county. Our county's got more votes, some, not all, but most. And so they're trying to pick and then send their people to the counties with bigger ones that are going to bind theirs. That's how they're trying to do it.
Okay, it would only be relevant if you would share what county you're chairman of, so people from that county could visit with you about how it could get on the slate for your
Lincoln.
county. Lincoln County?
Yeah.
Okay. If you live in Lincoln County and you want to give this, what's your name?
David.
David, give David your name, address, and serial number, and,
Okay, one more question over here, and then we have to cut.
all right.
I've heard yes and no to this question. Do you have to go to the caucus in your registered township?
Yes.
Absolutely. You won't be on their list to verify if you don't.
John, I'd like to make a plea for anybody who's in the Wild Horse Township. Look it up,
Yeah.
don't know what you're in. I'm in the Wild Horse Township.
Dennis is on the state committee, and he's been widely involved. He's a constitutional conservative, and I can vouch for him that you'll get a fair shake in his caucus.
Okay, you are definitely the last one.
I mean, I am from the city of St. Louis, and it's a county also itself, right?
City of St. Louis caucus will happen on March 24 at the Manachek Library.
Right by my house.
Okay.
And they
Is
moved it.
there a chairman, a Republican?
Yeah, Sharon Barnes. She runs the same.
All of that contact information is on the mogop.org website under the caucus menu. If it's not there now, it has to be up, turned in by 15 days ahead of the caucus. Thank you so much for all of your good questions.
Are you all ready to go to the caucus now? No. I thought this was a great presentation. It's a complicated topic, but I think John helped clarify a lot of things. And in the handouts, you can read about all of this and go on different websites if you still have questions. And we have a whole month left to get ready for it. Do your homework. There is several caucus meetings. There is the St. Louis Tea Party is talking about caucuses on February 24. That's at the, Donna, where is that meeting? Clayton Crown Plaza. For instance, Jefferson Township is having talks about caucuses this coming Thursday. The Barnum Women's Club in Kirkwood is talking about caucuses on next Thursday, or no, next Friday. So if you go, Judy put the names or the places of upcoming caucus meetings or orientation on the website, so you can find it.
Hey Frida, I just want to mention one thing. I didn't hear it mentioned at all, but a lot of folks don't even know that the other order of business on the agenda for County Caucus, March 17th, is the whole discussion on the party platform.
Yes.
This is where we're going to submit changes or things that we want to see
Yes.
on the, strengthen the party platform. That's gonna take like all day.
I have already asked people across, different people to give me suggestions of what they would want to have added to the party platform. And I would like to put together a list of things that we want to submit at all the caucuses to the caucus chairman of changes to the platform. However, the platform that is currently out on the website for the Missouri Republican Party is the 2008 platform. The 2012 platform will be out there on the draft prior to March 17, okay? And then MOPP is gonna collect comments to put in everybody's hand to take to their caucus meetings.
Good.
And you wanted to say something?
Well, I think that's not quite accurate. I think in the past, we have amended the previous platform, taken it as the template and made amendments, substitutions to a particular thing. I know there's quite a movement on this year to add a plank regarding Agenda 21, which the RNC has already approved at their winter meeting. I'd like to see that get added in, but for the most part, you go to the MOGOP website and find the 2008 platform. It's a very strong platform. It was done by Delbert Scott, who's a great conservative legislator, senator who was termed out of the state legislature, and you won't find very much in there that you will feel like you need to change. You may want to add something or change something slightly, but don't feel like you have to start from scratch and bring a whole bunch of ideas. We will start, the platform committee will meet at the first meeting, will be on the Friday before the district convention. There will be a platform committee that will receive these suggestions that are submitted at the caucus level, and they will work from the 2008 and develop the 2012 platform in its final form, approved at the state convention. There won't be a 2012 platform put up before the caucus.
Are you on the platform committee, John?
I am not.
Oh,
At this
too bad.
point, I may be at, I may be at the, appointed to that, we've talked about it, but those appointments haven't been made yet in the 7th district anyway.
But we want to make recommendations specifically for education, because I don't like what's in the party platform now. And I'm asking the experts, Gretchen and where's Ann is here, to write up some comments about education. Okay.
I'm gonna collect the straw poll.
Straw polls.
And also, we're gonna post the locations of other caucus meetings and trainings on our Facebook page. If you wanna friend us on Facebook at Missouri Precinct Project, just type that in the search bar. And then we'll have them posted, and we'd like to have you join us there anyway, for, updated information. So, did I get all you guys here? What's that? I said I folded it. Oh, that's cool. Did I get all you guys?
Sir?
I have a suggestion.
No, I'm going to be here, but I don't want to be confined to the front right now. I need to break.
And also assuming a certain level of understanding, that there's a lot of people here, I think, who are clueless about this. It's gonna take a lot of research on your part, but in the future, for these presentations, I would recommend that you put together a PowerPoint presentation that more clearly articulates this process to those people who don't understand.
That's a great suggestion.
Basic way.
But the caucus process can be very cumbersome. And, depends on each individual caucus or each township. It's hard to cover everything. So, yes, people have to educate themselves, and there's a lot of information out there that can be used. We're gonna take about a 5-minute break, and then we're talking about poll working at the polls, and how to identify voter fraud.
Where do we get it?
You don't have to stay, but you're welcome. It's a huge turnout. They're all gone. Okay. Like I said, the Board of Election holds training sessions for anybody that signs up to become a poll worker. But we just want to repeat that. And the one point I would like to make is we have 4 elections this year. We already had one. The big election is November 6th? 9th? 6th. We cannot wait to learn the process until that election. Let me tell you, that election will be a zoo. The polling places will be overwhelmed, the poll workers will be overwhelmed, and if you don't understand the rules by then, you will be overwhelmed if you're a poll worker. So we want to encourage people to start volunteering to become a poll worker now in the early elections. There's an election in April where you elect your city council, your school board members, your fire district people. Voter turnout for those elections is usually 20%. So it's a little bit more than what we just went through, but the polls are quiet. You can get your bearings, you can learn how the process works. The election in August is when we elect all of our candidates. This is a real primary. We elect who is going to run for the Senate, who's going to run for Congress, who's going to run for governor. You elect all your committeemen, committeewomen. Those elections will be a higher turnout. But the big turnout is in November, the presidential election. Everybody needs to volunteer to work in that election. Do you know the Board of Elections in St. Louis County is usually between 300 and 400 people short to work the elections? And it's always the Republicans that don't show up. So what happens? The Board of Elections assigns Democrats to be a Republican for the day. Now you always wonder about voter fraud? That's how it happens. We need more Republicans to volunteer to work inside the polls. So that's why we're starting early, to train people, so they understand what's going on. And I always get a little more too passionate about this, but...
You're allowed.
Really? We're going to talk about what is the role of the poll worker and how do we make sure that proper election law is followed. Here's a layout of a polling place. And we're going to talk about workstation 1 through 3. What happens here? You get issued a voter ticket with a consecutive number. Somebody checks your voter ID. I have a list of acceptable IDs coming up. The voter initials the accuracy of the address that is in the precinct roster. They register. They make sure that the voter is registered because he is in the precinct roster. And they have the voter print their full name on the little ticket. They verify the ballot style with the voter, and that could be in the primary. It was, did you want a Democratic ballot or a Republican ballot? Or it could be, in some polling places, they have different ballots. You vote for different things. They might cover 2 school districts. Or, it's just split. So they verify what ballot you will be voting on. And a bipartisan team, a Democrat and a Republican, sign the voter ticket to make sure all the information is correct. Yes, John?
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'll get you back just a little bit. Did you define terms? Because the seminar is on poll watchers, and now you're talking about election judges. or poll workers, and I'm wondering if anybody's confused besides me. In other words, this table is election judges. There's 2 from each party that work this table, and poll watching is a different function that, where people from the parties come in and watch the election judges and make sure they do a good job.
Did I say poll watchers?
I'm not sure.
I'm talking about poll workers, and according to our booklet that we get from the Board of Election, poll workers are people that work behind the different tables and verify voter information. Poll watcher is something totally different.
Okay, but that's what the seminar was said to be, poll watching, was it not? Isn't that what the agenda says we're talking about poll watching?
Instructions for poll workers.
I'm sorry, I misread it. Never mind.
But we will talk about poll judges or poll watchers because there's different terms and a lot of people are confused. What does that mean?
Well, the 2 parties are all the parties that want to are supposed to supply workers at the polls, like you're discussing. They are also called election judges. They're chosen by the county clerk and deputized and sworn in and all of that. Another part of avoiding election fraud is once those people are chosen, or if 4 Democrats are chosen to work because they couldn't find enough Republicans, another option that the party people have is to appoint a poll, it's called a poll challenger and a poll watcher. And they are party people that have the right by law to sit in the process and watch to make sure the election judges do their job correctly.
Correct. Now, Linda, you want to talk a little bit about what can go wrong with this spot at this point?
Well, I have to correct first. And work area 1, because it depends on where you are, which county. The city is different than the county, is different than probably where you have your elections held, because each individual county is election authority. They appoint their election commissioners, and they can approve how they're going to run their election, fairly similar to how the state mandates it done, but it's a little bit different in each one. I work both in the city, St. Louis city elections. I've also worked in St. Louis county elections. I've also been a trainer and an election judge, the one at St. Louis County that recruits, trains, and places the poll workers. So I've been on the inside and know what I'm talking about. But we have in St. Louis County, we specify 6 different workstations, and each one has a different function. And so workstation 1 or area 1 in St. Louis County, all that person does is they have the voter come in, they come to them with their ID, they check and make sure that they have the proper ID, which there is a list. And right now, we do not have to have a photo ID, but we do have to have either a valid driver's license issued by any state, or a voter ID card that you're sent from the election board. The identification issued by the state of Missouri or an agency of the state. Identification issued by any agency of the United States government. Identification issued by any institute of higher learning located within Missouri, like your university, college, trade, or technical schools, or personally known by both supervisors with an acceptable form without, if you don't have any kind of ID. So that one is probably not very likely since it changes so much, you know, the supervisors. Or you can have a recent utility bill, bank statement, government check, payroll check, voter notification card, or other government document containing the current name and address of the voter. And that must match the precinct binder.
Those last two, known by the supervisors or the bank statement, they have to vote by what we call voter affidavit. That's where they are actually affirming that they are who they say they are. And so those are the only acceptable forms of identification. So the person that is working at workstation 1 will actually check that in. They will have what's called a voter ticket, and on that, it will have the location number. It will have the voter number sequence, which is actually 1 through 50 is what we start with, so each person will get a specific number. That's how you know when you go to vote what number you are and how many people have gone out to vote, is by that. We can't tell you, but if you're smart, you'll know. The date, and then it'll have a ballot style. That's not put on until work area 2. We just have the voter print their name. And we're gonna let them know that there's, right now, currently, we have 2 different forms of voting. You have the OptiScan, or you have the touch screen. There is, right now, it's still in committee, but we're trying to get rid of the touch screens because we have had issues with them. And in Missouri, one of the most important things is to have a paper trail, because if we have to have a recount, we need that paper trail to verify that that computer accurately counted everyone's vote. We have had problems with our touch screens. They call them a DRE. It's a direct result entry, and it prints up on a tape. I, myself, in the last several elections, have had to call tech specialists because it is either jammed, it's not been printing, and you don't know until you've had several people sometimes come in and vote that we don't have a written record of it. So that's the problem we're seeing. This is why actually a Democrat and Republican have drawn up a bill in the House. It's in committee right now. It's been read twice. It went to committee, and we're hoping that we can have that taken care of before the presidential election. So that way we'll only have the OptiScan, which is a paper ballot, which is easier for us to do a recount, because we need to know where all our votes were. We need to have a paper trail for that.
Okay, I have the voter IDs listed on the screen. And Linda has already talked about poll work area 1 and 2.
Well, 2 I have not.
Oh.
Work area 2 is where your binders actually are, where all the voters' names are, okay? Things that can happen is if that person is not in that binder, that's when they need to go to the next area, which is work area 3, where they will have to vote by affidavit, if they are allowed to vote. And there are several reasons. We're not gonna go totally into this, or else I'm gonna describe the whole election process, which I could probably do, but it's very, I spent 2 hours training poll workers on each. So you'd be here for 2 hours having me explain what every process is. But basically, the thing, the most important thing that we're looking for is we need people to actually fill these positions at the poll election judge level, because you are going to have the best likelihood of stopping voter fraud if you are working as an election official. And that's what an election worker is an election official. A challenger, which I was going to talk about, is also an important facet of this process. But if you don't have enough people working as election judges, which is our problem in St. Louis City and St. Louis County, then you're already in jeopardy. A challenger really cannot do too awfully much. They're very limited in what they can do. So our best bet to curtail voter fraud is to fully staff all of our open election judge positions throughout. our
An
county.
election judge in this term is really all the people that work inside the polls.
Exactly.
Could be a poll worker, could be a supervisor, could be an assistant supervisor.
Mhm.
Those are considered election judges.
Right.
Election challengers, or what's the other term they use? Watchers.
Watchers.
It's a different thing, we get
Right.
into that a little later.
Mhm.
Okay, yes.
I'm just wondering, can you only serve in those judge positions in the area where you actually?
No.
Well,
You can become a poll worker in pretty much any county. But let's say you want to work in St. Louis County, you have to tell the Board of Election in St. Louis County, and they will get permission from your county that you can work there.
normally, people work in the county that they live in, okay? But in some of our smaller outlying counties, they don't need near as many poll workers. So we identified this problem, and when Matt Blunt was actually Secretary of State, I think is when they pushed forth the change in the bill that allowed us to be able to have other people from other areas. As long as they have permission from their election authority, that they have their polls completely staffed, they'll allow you to move to an adjacent county or another county to actually help staff those polls.
We actually know a person, Mindy Patterson, you might all know about her. She travels around the state because she's trying to defeat this your vote counts issue. And she said she can give us volunteers from around the state because people in other counties are very upset that St. Louis polls they close at 7 or they close late if they want to. Their results always come in late. And she's willing to put people into the county and the city that don't live there, that man those polls to make sure that they're staffed properly. So, yes.
Are you poll workers there from the time the polls open to the time it closes?
Yes.
And then you would suggest that you have an absentee ballot and vote ahead of time?
Yes, we always do suggest that you vote by absentee ballot. In fact, I've worked elections since I've been registered to vote. I don't think, very seldom have I ever voted in my polling place.
The polls open at 7?
6.
And close at 7.
But you have to be there at 5.
Right.
And you usually don't get finished up until
7:30 or 8.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a long day, but it's well worth it, and it is a civic duty that is much needed.
Before the polls open, because of absentee voting, the roving deputies deliver to each polling place the supplemental sheets, and they have on it, they're marked, who has already voted. For instance, has an absentee ballot been sent or received, they're transferred in, they've been deleted, because things change between the time they print the precinct roster and the time the polls open. So we deliver, what did I call them? Supplemental. And they have to be verified. When the polls open, the precinct workers have to make sure that what is on the supplemental sheet is transferred into the actual precinct roster. Sometimes they forget. And I asked them this time around, I said, have you transferred all your information to the precinct roster? Oh, we didn't know we had to do that. Well, so how do you know if somebody voted absentee? You mean we have to check that? Yes, you have to check that.
So that's why you need good, strong supervisors in each one of the polling places, so that they're making sure that their workers are doing their jobs.
The reason I know this, I'm a roving deputy. I go from polling place to polling place. I deliver the supplemental sheet before 6 o'clock, and then I ask them questions throughout the day. You know, before we get to that. Anyway, but if people do not transfer the data from the supplemental sheet into the precinct roster, they don't know this person has moved out, this person has voted already. It's important that all that stuff be transferred into the precinct roster. Want to add anything to that? For instance, if somebody has transferred out, they're not allowed to vote at this location. They have to go to their new location. People don't like that, but it's the law. You cannot, if you move from one area to another, you can't vote at your old polling place. People complain about it, but I'm sorry, them are the rules. Could they vote provisional?
They can, but their ballot will not count.
How do they know if they've moved out of the area?
Well,
They come up with their ID and it doesn't match, number one. Or the Board of Election is aware that they transferred out and the supplemental sheet notes that.
And
No,
they're aware.
when we have them at workstation 2 with the precinct finder, we ask them, is this your correct address? And they're supposed to initial. Sometimes they will actually pipe up and say, oh, actually I've moved. You have to stop right then and there. They cannot vote.
Once they say they've moved, whether they've
Right.
registered at the other address or not?
Doesn't matter. If they're in the precinct finder there and they make us aware of that fact, they cannot, we have to find out what their new address is. We have to look it up and make sure this is still the polling place. And if it's not, we fill out an affidavit and we send them to their new polling place and they'll be allowed to vote there. It's just,
Even if they haven't registered as
well, if it's within the county. Okay, this is why we always try to get the word out to everyone, because I love my fair-weathered voters. That's what I call them, my ones that only vote every 4 years, and they've moved 2 and 3 times between one election and the next election. And I'm talking about St. Louis City, St. Louis County. We have a lot of transient, they move a lot. And, I mean, it's very simple to update your voter registration. All you have to do is, on the back of your card, is the form to actually fill it out and send it back in, and they'll update you and send you your new stuff. If you can fill out a change of address card, you should surely be able to do that. I don't understand. I've moved a lot, and I've never been off the voter registration rolls. But it's important to me, because I vote every election. But the thing of it is if you're in the same county and you just move from one location to another, yes, you can still vote. You would probably be thrown into a status, that's what we call it. We send out periodically mailings, and if we get 2 mailings back that say you've put in a change of address, then you're thrown into a status. You're still on the roll, you're just not active in the binder. Then that means we're trying to track down where you are.
Remember we said at workstation number 1 and 2, you were supposed to check the correct address. That's how you identify people. For instance, another thing is that you check that you should transfer from your supplemental to the main binder. If somebody was sent an absentee ballot, the Board of Election hasn't gotten it back, and the guy comes in and wants to vote. Can't vote. Sorry. Work area number 3. That's when they collect, say what ballot style they want, and that is the difference between the OptiScan and the touch screen.
A ticket, they go straight up to where the rosters are, the binders and sign. So there is nothing, and then they go from there over to their ballot. It's a totally different.
So every county runs it a little bit
Right.
different. That's what I suggested. You should go sign up to be a poll worker in the earlier low turnout elections, so you understand the process.
Well, you're gonna have to go through the training.
I know, right. work area 4 is the problem table.
Yes, that's the affidavit.
If they cannot identify, somebody comes in, they have a valid ID, well, you know, they have a driver's license, for instance, or they have their voter identification card, but they can't find them in the register, the big register. They can't find them on the supplemental roll. They have a Palm Pilot, they go to the Palm Pilot. They find them in there. They are a registered voter, the address is correct. They just somehow or another didn't make it to the book. They then do an affidavit and they're allowed to vote. Okay, so they have to go through certain processes depending on what the issues are. And I have not worked the problem table, so I'm not quite sure.
Oh, I've done pretty much all of it.
But if the I'm sorry, a lot of times, the Palm Pilot doesn't work either. They must call the Board of Election. They cannot let that person vote without having the okay of the Board of Election. This is not a problem unless, in the 2010 election, the systems in Jeff City were down all day long. Nobody could get through all day long. Nobody could get through to the Board of Election because they were overwhelmed with phone calls. So what do people do? They have to write a provisional ballot. And provisional ballots will be checked and rechecked at the Board of Election before they count, before they can certify the count. But I'm still convinced that that whole thing was by design. All polling places in the county where I work were overwhelmed. The poll workers didn't know what to do. I mean, people just kept coming in, and they couldn't get through the Board of Elections. Some people got smart. The Board of Election issues a cell phone to every polling place. So when they get that call, they know right away this is a polling place. They couldn't get through, so some poll workers used their own private cell phone, and lo and behold, they got through. So what does that tell you? It makes me very suspicious. You got anything to add to this?
Well, just the different reasons why people might vote by affidavit. Their name is not in the precinct binder. They've had an address change. We also vote those, a lot of people may not know this, but we will go to curbside and actually vote a voter who cannot come into the polling place. So if they send somebody in and make us aware of that, the precinct binder never leaves the polling place, so therefore, we take the polling place to you in the form of an affidavit. So we take and check their information in the precinct binder, we go out, we actually have them sign the affidavit that's affirming that all the information is correct. We allow them to vote by an OptiScan, and then we bring it back in, and it is accepted. A name and an address change. We also have a new program that's called Safe at Home Program, and that's for any women, rape victims, crime victims. It's a new program that the Secretary of State's office has created that keeps their home addresses confidential. And that is because our poll, you can go and actually get a list of the registered voters, which coordinates your address. And if someone is actually, been stalked or a victim of sexual assault or, battered woman, her address, is something sacred. So they have actually set up this program where they'll be assigned a specific, it's a mail forwarding sort of thing, so that their address is not known to the public.
Yeah, although they don't want to give out the address, are they at least
Exactly.
keeping track of how many people are voting that way?
Oh, yeah, they have to actually
I would assume we wouldn't have
literally issue
100%
the
rape
card.
victims in the United States.
They're issued a card through the Secretary of State's office. And so we know who they are and all. And they sign, it's just that their home address is kept confidential, so that it's not part of the public record. Also absentee ballot at the polling place, say someone actually did apply for an absentee ballot, but they, for whatever reason, didn't give it back to the election board, and we have never received it. They could come to the election board on the day of the election, and we would have to call the election board for authorization to make sure that they had not received it. And they would be given approval to actually vote. And then also the no ID and personally known by the supervisors.
So we move on to section, the OptiScan.
And hopefully we won't have to deal with that.
Uh,
Or not the OptiScan, the other one. OptiScan's fine. OptiScan is just where they fill out the ballot by, it's like your old standardized text where you have to fill in the little circle and then you slip it through the OptiScan reader.
But there can be problems with the OptiScan.
Right.
You can have an over or undervote. If there's an undervote, the voter did not mark all the candidates or issues, then the voter can decide to accept the ballot, which means is I'm not gonna vote, I'm not gonna let you know who I vote for, but I have voted. They just don't want to mark the ballot. And the voter can return the ballot. When it says return, they can return that to the voter and he can make his choices and then run through it again.
Or he could have overvoted. Maybe he accidentally voted for
Right.
two different candidates and there was only one. If that happens, they do have the choice of spoiling that ballot and being able to recast their ballot. It's never been read. So
Now, what can go wrong here? They don't spoil the ballot?
Oh, no.
No?
Yeah, if they say that they want a new ballot, then they have to spoil it. Then we mark spoil it and we get it in the envelope for that. Sometimes if it ever stops reading, we do have an emergency bin and a provisional bin where we temporarily put those. It is a locked area in the stand of the OptiScan reader. And when our tech does get it up and working again, then the supervisors will go over in a bipartisan team, open that up, and they will put all of those through the OptiScan at that time. Of course, the provisionals always stay in their envelope. Those are determined at the election board.
Now, our favorite topic, the touchscreen voting. I don't know if you saw in the Ghost Dispatch, there was an article the other day talking about touchscreen voting, the DREs, how they cause problems because the paper jams. And lo and behold, 2 days later, I hear somebody wrote up a bill to go through the legislature to eliminate the DREs, which is what she talked about earlier, which would be great.
Right.
We would go back to paper ballot. No more electronic voting.
Right.
So now it's SB 542. So call your senators, call your legislators, make sure that this goes through and is approved. And the goal is to have the machines eliminated prior to the November election. That's fantastic. Somebody actually listened. Yes?
Hey, I was thinking earlier, so when I listen to Dr. Michael Savage, he talks about, maybe someone else has heard this, but that there's a company in Spain that owns the technology or the software that runs our voting machines. I don't know if you guys have heard that, or is that the OptiScreen, or is that the touchscreen, or both? Do you guys know?
That's the
Actually,
touchscreen.
I have heard more with the touch screen, but I have heard that they can also do it with the OptiScreen. I don't think it's quite as prevalent. I think it's much easier with the touch screen. For some, from what I have seen of the videos of the different times that they have done this, they were able to go in and somehow during the day, disrupt the machine itself to where the software would change, and you would think you were voting, say, for Ron Paul, and it was voting for Rick Santorum.
Do you know if the legislature addresses the spam issue?
They're addressing the electronic, the touch screen.
Okay.
Right. But on the OptiScan, you do have a paper record. I mean, you have the actual ballot. Okay? So if it ever comes to a recount, you can recount the actual ballot. You just have to have an honorable Secretary of State that agrees not to count things that were found in a trunk. Like they did in Minnesota. Okay, so I think, yes, Jim?
I was just going to ask on the touch screen, is there a way to look at your paper record to see that you have voted the way
Yes.
you think you
Right.
voted?
There is a,
Before you cast it, you should always look over, because you can see the paper, and it will show you what it's voted at that time.
Okay.
Before you cast.
but that's the
After
problem
you
there.
cast it, then it goes up in there.
That's the problem they're having, that a lot of times the paper jams, and she was talking about that earlier. So, you know, you discover this maybe after 100 votes, so what happened to them? You don't have a record. Let me say one thing. I said before that in the 2010 election, the system was down all day and people had lots of problems. And they couldn't get through to the Board of Elections. In St. Louis County, they now have roving tech guys that come around. They have 5 polling places that they're responsible for. They go around to all the different polling places and address their technical problems. So if somebody has a problem with a machine, they can shut it down and wait for the tech guy to get there and fix it. So they're working on it. Opening and setup of polling stations. People have to turn their machines to vote positions, print out 0 tapes. If it's not 0, they need to shut it down. They have to hold all completed ballots in the emergency bin. They complete an opening certificate for all touchscreen machines and verify that all polling election information on each terminal is set at 0. I don't know if that ever is a problem. You?
No, I've never known it to be a
Closing of polling stations. Anyone in line at 7 will be allowed to vote. Anybody showing up after 7 cannot vote. I don't think that happens in St. Louis City. There is always a judge that allows the polls to stay open, depending on whatever the issues are. They'll let those people come in and vote. But I would like to find some volunteers that could go to those troubled polling places and watch it. Take pictures.
Actually, that was the 2000 election. I think
Right.
we've kind of clamped down on them. That's one reason why I work in the city of St. Louis, and I'm actually a roving deputy, so, is because I was appalled, because I worked in the county, in that election, and heard that, and was like, what do you mean? Law says that it closes at 7. The judge does not have the ability to override the legislature's law. And so, that was, as far as I know, it has only been in the year 2000 election that has happened.
But it did happen.
It did happen. And-
Question.
Yes.
What's been done to make sure that doesn't happen again?
We have actually changed a lot of the Republicans that work in the city of St. Louis. That's one reason why I work down in the city of St. Louis, is so that we can verify that that's not gonna happen again.
You know, in 2000, Jesse Jackson came to St. Louis and found a judge to write an order to keep the polls open. And you want to go up against Jackson?
Which should have never happened.
But that's why we need Republican volunteers in all these places that follow the rules.
So are you working, like, for example, with with the county police or the sheriff? Because obviously they're the ones that are going to
Oh, actually, roving
what
that,
you have just said is an illegal intrusion by a judge into the legal process.
exactly.
It's up to the person who's going to apply that rule to say, this is not applicable, it cannot be enforced, or whatever.
Right. In the city of St. Louis, our bipartisan teams of roving deputies travel with a police officer. We actually have a police officer that we're assigned to for that day.
All day?
So, oh yeah. So when I come into a polling place, it's not just me and my Democrat counterpart, it's also a police officer. So I show up with a show of force. And they understand a show of force. And this is very important. But this is another key reason why we need true Republicans working to staff our polls on the inside to verify and make sure that our polls are run according to law.
Okay, and if there's something like that, is there a process for filing a grievance or something? I mean, when you, again, you have someone who's interjecting themselves and they have no business doing so, there ought to be some kind of a review process or something, because they did something that's not constitutional, it's illegal, whatever, and you had no business, it shouldn't have happened to begin with.
Right.
It did happen,
So,
someone allowed it to happen, but it shouldn't have happened to begin with.
right, and that's why I'm going to talk about, when we get finished with this, I'm gonna talk about the challengers and the importance of having the challengers in the polling places. But, you know, their capacity is limited in what they can do. To me, and having worked in the election process since 1980, I have seen firsthand that the ones that have the most control are those that are commissioned by the election authorities in that county. So working in the polling place as election judge gives you the most power to be able to stop fraud from happening within the polling place. Because you'll be trained to know what should and shouldn't happen.
I often hear people say, well, I brought up this issue, but they told me that's the way we always do it. Or, we don't want to change it now, that's the process we've set up. We need people inside the polling places, Republicans, that understand the rules and don't let themselves be talked out of the right thing to do. You cannot, if somebody says that's the way we've always done it, you have to be able to stand up and say, well, we have to follow election law. It doesn't matter what you have always done. A lot of people just don't want to do that, it's too uncomfortable. But being too uncomfortable or losing an election is not acceptable. So be uncomfortable for a day. That's why I'm always preaching we need more people. Yes, ma'am?
What would you do if you had a situation where somebody got angry or violent or something?
Well,
Call the election.
call a board of election and they'll make sure somebody gets there.
Or they'll send somebody?
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
they'll,
Oh, yeah.
yes. They have area deputies that are roving around besides the roving deputies. And there's people available now, like I said, more and more they are aware of that they have to be more supportive of the polling places. Huh? What?
Well, let's hope not, because
Yes, Jackie?
I just want to say a couple things about what you said. I think you're absolutely right, and as Linda and I talked about, you're going to have more power and more able to fix something if you are an assistant supervisor or a supervisor, which is where I work my way up to supervisor, because the other thing is, and maybe you said this already, Frida, these earlier elections are great practice.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be, you want to be in a position where you feel comfortable, you've done it, and you you're confident in your authority come November.
Exactly.
Let me talk a little bit about a roving deputy. This last election was my 4th time as a roving deputy. I go to 20 different polling places, just like Linda does in the city, I do it in the county. We go around all day, we find that we ask them, what's the problem? Do you have any problems? What's going wrong? Do you have any issues? Are our machines working? I might check the machine, the little tape, stuff like that. We make sure that nobody is outside electioneering that's close to the polls. And I'm beginning to understand how the whole process works, and I speak up. In the first few times, I would just go in and say, oh, hi, how are you? Now I speak up. I don't let them tell me this is the way we've always done it. I just tell them, no, doesn't work. Yes, sir.
A few people always want to vote us restricted in the primary, and you have to deal with that.
Well, it's law. It's law that they have to
They
declare.
don't want to declare.
Well, if they, then they can vote. I mean, they have to, if there's issues, they can vote on those issues. But, in our system that we have set up now, they have to declare in order to get a specific ballot. And that's just how it is. That's the law, and all you can do is follow the law.
Okay. One of the things that roving deputies do is at the end of the day, after the polls close, we have to collect all the ballots. We go to one place and 20 different polling places. Last one, it was 35 different polling places bring their stuff to us. We have to make sure that when they seal the pouch, which is what has the votes in it, there's no broken seals. That's the biggest pain. I found it was raining Tuesday night, and 4 people showed up with broken seals. So then we have to, ask more questions. Make sure we reseal the pouches. Nothing comes out. Everything is still in. It's cumbersome. In the city, I was told
It's different.
right.
Actually, I shut down the different polling places. So, they basically, do their totals and they gather things up, but then my partner and I come in and we specifically secure the ballots, secure everything that we need for the election board. There's a certain amount of, stuff that is not pertinent to, what we call auditing election. So those things will actually be packed up and left behind. We'll collect those later. The election board will come by and get those. But all of the pertinent things for us to understand what happened in that polling place, we gather up, secure, and take it with us. Of course, I travel with a police officer, so I have security in everything that I do. One of the main things that a lot of people don't know, that the election board, after the election, what we do, we go into a full work mode. After that election gets over with, we have 14 days in order to certify an election to the Secretary of State. What that means is we have to determine what happened in every polling place that has had any kind of issues, any kind of problems. We have to go into an investigative mode and determine from what we find from the machines, from what notes were taken at the time, what happened, and we even call our poll workers if sometimes we have questions about things after the election. But we have 14 days in order to certify the count.
Did they just change this process that is more enforced? Or has it, like, you close the polls as roving deputies, you make sure that everything runs right? Has that always been in place? Really?
Ever since I've been working there.
Okay. Let me talk a little bit about volunteering as a poll worker. As I said before, anybody that's registered to vote in the state can become a poll worker. If you want to work in a different county, you have to get the permission of your county of residence. Volunteers will be paid a fee. You can run, I think it starts at 60, goes up to 130, plus you get paid for the training that day. So you don't do it for nothing. We never have enough poll workers in North County and in the city, so please think about volunteering and do it early so you learn the process. And you can find your local board of elections to find out what their training schedule is for each election. Now, Linda is going to talk a little bit about poll challengers. What are poll challengers? Or poll watchers?
Yeah. Frida, are we all going to have to be retrained before the November general election?
Probably.
They probably will call you in just because they'll probably do it prior to the August primary. It depends, they may decide to do it then, they may decide to do it right before the November election. But we do like to refresh with all of our poll workers what's gonna take place because November is gonna be
So
so
things change.
crazy. And we just wanna verify that everybody knows what they're gonna do on that election.
Yes, ma'am.
How did you say you go about, getting the training, where you find out?
Just call your
Call the Board of
election.
Elections
Yeah,
In
your
my
Board of
county?
Elections.
in your
Which
county.
county are you?
Franklin,
Yeah,
so just look it up, Board of
Right.
Elections.
it should be in the government agency.
Tell them you want to be a poll worker and when do they have their training?
They also have forms you can fill out when you go and vote, you ask
Right.
one of the people, that's what I did when I just voted this past. I said, hey, how do you become an election judge?
Right.
And you fill out forms and somebody will be in touch.
Do you agree to some of the stuff we're saying up here? Having been a poll worker?
I had not been a poll worker
Oh,
yet.
sorry.
I said, I just, this last time I voted, I asked, how do you become
Okay.
an election judge? And the
Well,
guy
thank
said,
you.
fill out this form and somebody will be in touch.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, I would say, as Dave said, the best thing to do is to start with this April, the municipal
The low
elections,
turnout elections.
Because it's just a process. It's just that it's such a precise process that you don't have the confidence unless you've done it a couple times.
Right.
And from my perspective, really the only way to cheat, it will work if we truly do have both Democrats and Republicans there. But if what you have are all Democrats and some just say they're Republicans, then they can just cheat all day long.
Exactly.
Well, I can tell you firsthand what we had in Kinloch in St. Louis County. We had Democrats that were saying they were Republicans. So we had 2 Democrats manning the polling place. And what they would do is they would take and their people would come in and say, yeah, that person had to come in. And they'd be that person and they would sign and they would vote. So then when I took over, because that was one of my troubled children, I put real Republicans in that polling place. Well, then they went to start to threaten my Republicans because they were like, oh, so-and-so, yeah, I know them, you know, and that, no. Both of us have to know that person in order to verify. And so we kind of clamped down. When I stopped working inside, we had a mayoral election and I was asked by the election commissioner to actually work in that polling place because we were still having problems. Because the Democrat supervisor there, it was her way or the highway. And so I showed up that morning and I will never forget her face. She was like, because she knew who I was, because I taught her class. And she said, oh, you're working here today? And I said, yes, and we are gonna have a fair and honest election. Anyway, yeah, we just have to have people who can stand up and say, this is the way, because we send this book out, and it is how an election is supposed to be run. And so if they have a question and they say, no, we don't do it like, we've always done it like this, you can say, that's not how they tell us that it's supposed to be done.
Okay, you had a
Available somewhere on the net or like as a PDF?
They
No,
hand
when
those
you-
out when you go through training.
You go through training.
And how long does the training take?
2-3 hours.
Okay.
Okay,
And then if you want to serve in a different county, is it best to go to that particular county and start the process there?
Right, because you need to verify that they have enough of that particular party poll worker. Say, if you're in.
So you're saying that it's better to start where I'm at?
Right, it's better, the thing of it is if there are not enough Republicans to serve, say in
St. Charles County.
Which they're gonna have trouble finding Democrats probably, that's where all our Republicans ran off. But, if you're in St. Charles County and you're a Republican and you wanna work in St. Louis City, or St. Louis County, either one, it's best to, you have to get the approval from your county commissioners. It would probably not be a problem because they have more workers than they can stand there, so they would allow you to go over. Then they would get you in contact with the city or the county, whichever one.
The one thing I don't know yet, and maybe you know this, if you want to work in North County or in the city, can you tell the Board of Elections, I want to work at this location?
You can pretty much, we always have trouble getting people to go into those
Yes.
areas.
I had two comments, like, Freedom, one, I think in 2004, 2008, they assigned me to a location in the city, and I said, can it be like a more troublesome location? I said, are you sure? I said, I'm sure, and so you can request like that,
Oh, yeah, you
if
can.
they assigned me to someplace that was easier.
Right.
And so this is pretty easy, I said, well, maybe it's more difficult, or it's more effective, and so she did. So my question was, I'm thinking of like 3 roles, and just kind of like off the cuff right now, where do you think would be the most important role? Being a challenger, or being an election judge, or actually working for a candidate, or working, one of those 3, what would be the?
What would I want you to do?
Well,
I would want you to work as a whole, a judge on the inside, because that is where you're gonna have the greatest chance of being able to stop voter fraud, is being on the inside, because you are actually a commissioner for that. You are deputized to actually work and run that polling place. So a challenger does not have that. And what a challenger is just, it is a person that is appointed by the county chair of like the Republican county chair of St. Louis County would appoint, challengers for different polling places. Oh, yeah, the political parties or campaigns can actually have challengers in polling places. So if they think that there's gonna be, questions, or questionable voters in a particular area or whatever, then they can get credentialed workers to actually go in there. Those challengers have to be registered voters in that jurisdiction.